Better?
You're using Sublime. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So so this is my get and compare command. So when I type in some command like get and compare, client will do the program. So first let's go to this function get server file list. So what this function does is create a new message here and assembly this message. And this is my actually this encoder. It is my sender in client part. So I just encode it. That means I send it to from client to server. And so let's see how server responds this message. This is my server's code, and I use the send list function. So let's see what the function does. So I create a reply message, and I use the file system to get all the files in the current server's directory. And after that, I use this reply.setFile function. So this setFile function is just do a copy. Just do a copy, but from the file list in file system, copy to my message. So after that, I got my reply message. I just send it back to client here. And inside my client, this is part I received the message back from server. And oh yeah, I just returned that back. So this is a string array, and this is the map. So let me see the map. So this is what the map looks like. The key here is a string represent the file path, and the value here is the file info. This is the struct artifact. So let's see what I got in this. So I got stuff like name, size, modified date, and it is a directory or not. So back to client. I just return those stuff to my main function in client. So go back to here. So after this line, I got all the file list from server. I just print it out here, and I do a compare file list here. So I will basically compare the file list in the local directory in client and the file list I just received from server. So what I'm doing in this compare function is I just want to this if is for the files that exist in class directory. So I need to check the modification date. It is after or before. So and I can. So if it is after, I just put this file to my new file. So this is a new file, and new path is my return type. And otherwise, so if it is the directory I don't have, I just make a new directory. So basically, use this compare file list function to return a file map, and this file map, it is the difference between client files and server files. So let's write. I start my server first. So it will give me the output like the current directory of the server is server repo folder. I start my client. First thing I need to do, I need to set a directory. So my current directory in client side, it is a client repo folder. So let's see what this folder got. This is my client repo. I have a test folder. It is empty. I have another tst file. Then my server repo. I have two tst, and the folder containing another tst. So let me do a get and compare. So basically, so this is the map I received from server, and you can see the first column here represent the key of a map, and I have so for this one. So for the second one and the fourth one, so those two are folders. So you can see the file size is 0 and the directory it is true. So that means those two are folders. And the first one, third one, and the last one, there are two different TSTs inside the server folder. So here, after my comparison, I conclude the difference between client folder and the server folder, that is test2 and test3.txt. So yeah, that's my result for first probe.
Since your project will have multiple clients, right? Does the server have some kind of mechanism to provide the conflict from several clients to request the same to update the same file?
Yeah. Right now, I didn't provide any solution for that, but I will go to that. So first, right now, all my code is based on one client and one server. So I will go to multiple clients after that. So this is my first probe. Yeah, so my second probe is about group users. So what I'm seeing here is I want to separate different users into different groups. Like, so just like what Dropbox does. So multiple users in a same group, they can share a same folder instead of like, so you can access the folder in another group. So, so basically, what I'm doing right now in my code is when a server, no, when a user login himself, like using the username and password, can log in himself. So after the server receives the login information, it will switch the current directory to another directory represent the folder of that group. So you can see here, after client's login, server will change current directory to that group's directory. So client can, so after that, if client wants to do a synchronize, it is synchronizing the files in that group's folder instead of the root folder or other groups folder. And another thing here is server is responsible for managing all the user informations. In this case, I use the XML file to contain all the users' information, password and username. And when server start, it will load all the information from the XML file. So when the client send a login message here to server will check it based on the information loaded. Yeah. So the purpose for this probe is I want to keep the user's files clear. So the user in one specific group cannot access files in another group. So I think that definitely make more sense for these projects. Let's see the code for this probe. So let's see the XML file first. So I just hard code my XML file right now, and have different groups. Right now I got two groups. First one named SMA, and I have a bunch of users here, username and password. So the user will use username and password to log in. And the second group called DO have two users. So this is the user information defined in my XML file. And let's see, let's code. Yeah, so this is the login command. So after receiving login command from user, I will let user to input blah 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 like username, password, and send that login message from client to server. So inside this send login message method, I just assembly this message and send it to server. So let's see how server responds this this message. So if the message command equals login here, and actually this login, it is a string. I just put enum here in message. It is enum defined in message package, and I use check user function to check all the information inside that message. Here. This part, I just print all the user information in my XML file. And here I load all the information, metadata from my XML file. And here I do a searching. So if the group name and username and password all match, so I will return true. Otherwise, I just return false. So back to server. So this result, it is a true or false. It's a bool, and represent the user information is correct or wrong. And after that, if it is true, I come to the else here. So I just change the current directory to server repo plus the group name. So let me show you the folder structure I got for this probe. It's more clear to see something. So this is my server repo folder, and I have different groups represented by name here. And inside SMA group, we have some files only for SMA group. And yeah, so let's write to see what will happen. So create from last. To that. Client folder. Run my server first. Server first. So right now my server's directory is server repo folder. So set my directory in client side. So right now my directory for client side it is client repo folder, and for server side it is server repo folder. So let's do login. Let's put SMA, your name, or oh yeah, so I got it. So yeah, so you can see the server output right here. Successfully opened the XML file I got, and it's all the groups I just printed out. So here I changed the server's directory to SMA folder. So at the very beginning it is server repo folder, and after my login I changed it to SMA folder. So if after that I want to do a synchronize, so let me check the folder first to see what I have in right now in my client repo. So I just delete all this stuff first. So in my client folder, it is empty right now, and server folder just like I just showed. So let's move to synchronize. Yeah. So successfully transferred files from SMA folder to my client folder. So let's check the folder to see. Yeah, so I got those files from this three. Sorry, but yeah, here. So let's check the and yeah. So those are the files I just transferred from server's SMA folder. So yeah, so
if you'd had an existing SMA folder in the client that had one of the files, so now it would transfer the remaining ones into that.
Yeah, let's try. Synchronize it. Yeah, so let me see the output here. So received file SMA2, received the file SMA3, and I got those files in my. So yeah, so I just want to create a user policy like this to group different users. I think then definitely make more sense for this project. And probe 3, it is about file transfer. Actually, I already did it in my second probe, so I can skip.
Why don't we skip it because we have three presenters
sure, that's
today.
what I'm saying. Yeah, I just want to skip that. So summary about summary about my three probes. For the first one, I did get file list and compare. So the first thing I proved is I proved the communication channels between client and server. It's then I can send a simple message between client and server. And second thing here is client can get a file list. Contains file needs to be updated, so I can avoid some useless file transfer. So that's the purpose for first probe. And the second one, by grouping users, I built a pretty similar mechanism with Dropbox. And for the third one, it is a simple file transfer. That is that's really part for my project because I need to do a file synchronization. So what's next? So after those probe, the first thing I want to do is I want to create a login functionality because right now my user information in server it is hard coded. User cannot modify any information inside that. So for example, like the user wants to register a new user, I need to add a new user into that XML file. So that's what I need to do to add more flexibility into my project. And the second one, I want to provide a privilege mechanism. So that means I want to add more metadata into user information. Things like some user can modify some files in the shared folder, but some user can only download those files. You cannot modify any file from that. So by doing this, I need to add some new metadata into user information. I also need to implement send file from client to server. So that means the user can upload some files to server. It is not pretty hard. I just need to reuse the code I did for file transfer to implement that. And the third one, like how you just said, I want to test with multiple clients. So, because right now all my code based on one client and one server. So, I think if I want to do a multiple clients, there are some issues I need to fix. Like when I did a login, the server automatically changed the current directory to some groups folder. But it doesn't make sense actually. So, for example, like there are multiple users want to access my server. So if I do that after login, I need to change the directory back and forth because there are too many different users. So I think the correct way to fix that is when the user wants to synchronize files, I just change the directory. So if user one want to receive some files, I just change the user's directory to his folder, and if another user want to synchronize some other files, change it to his folder. So folder changing only happened when user.
Why wouldn't you have one path for each user? And so the server isn't ever changing the directory, it's just using that path that the user, for each user.
Yeah, oh yeah,
That
that
way,
makes sense.
all the concurrency problems go out the window. It's all now.
Because the reason why I changed my current directory is inside my file system. That file system get file function only can get the file in the current directory. I cannot input any relevant path into that function. So I will fix that. I think that makes sense. Yeah. And last thing, I think last thing I really want to do is I really want to create a GUI for each client, because I think my debug code, it is pretty annoying.
Does Go give you any help with that?
Oh, I searched something online. There's a blog talking about to build a GUI, but he used some other stuff like JS and CSS. So, and use Go's code on the back end. I don't know if it is doable or not, but I will give a try.
Okay.
Yeah. Because it's so annoying.
Can Go interact with other languages? I mean, are there bindings to other languages?
I'm not quite sure yet.
Yeah.
So I will try.
It might be just as useful. I mean, building a client would be cool and easier for you, but it might be just as useful for the rest of us to know, are there bindings to other languages so I could build it if I wanted to, not you, but you know, to know, is it reasonable to build a GUI in a different language or does Go have some mechanism to build, answering those kind of questions would be really useful.
I didn't find any.
I looked a little bit when I first looked at Go and didn't find anything, but
I didn't find any help package in Go to support GUI. Yeah, I think probably I need to integrate other programming languages.
I'll bet Go has bindings to C. I'll bet my bottom dollar, because it's an awful lot of this looks like C. Okay, and Kernel was one of the guys who Kernel and Richie were the guys who wrote C. And Kernel is one of the 3 Google developers who do it. Same guy.
Okay.
So I'll bet it has bindings to C.
Yeah. And what did I learn from this project? Actually, before my first presentation, I didn't start coding. I just learned some basic Go syntax online. I didn't start my own coding. So after my own coding, I found out it is a really interesting language. Pretty, different interesting stuff to use. For example, like the arrow handling. Yeah, the Go can return an arrow tab instead of like other language we use try catch block. It's pretty interesting. It is pretty straightforward. I think the features in Go, I mean the multiple returns functions, it is straightforward. Just return whatever we want from that function. It's pretty cool, I think. Yeah. So basically, this is all I got. Thank you.
Any questions for? Yep. Okay. Nice job, Jen. Okay, so Eric's next, and then you're. If I assume that we'll be done in time. If we don't, if Eric gets windy and talks for too long, then we'll do you on Tuesday. But I hope we'll get you done today.
Hey guys, my name is Eric, and today I'm just going to show some programming presentation for the fabric for IoT devices. One clarification I would like to make before I get started really quick is this project is intended for abstracting all communications between IoT devices. Failsafe is just one of the features, and other features might include load balancing and all kinds of other stuff for IoT devices. So it's a highlight of the feature, which is the failsafe. But the whole goal of the fabric is to abstract almost all communication that's going on the network layer. So again, just to recap, basically it's a framework, and the focus of this project is to basically retain connectivities or availability of the IoT devices in an event of backplane failure. So
suggestion that
Yes,
maybe you don't use all the words you might use and squeeze them within this. Okay,
Yeah.
You're going so fast, I have a hard time.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So basically, there are a lot of components that goes into this. I try to make the title as descriptive as possible. Probably not. I'm not doing the best job. So
That's good.
this was basically a general architecture from the technology presentation. One thing that's changed is the IPC component here. So it was pretty much just the fabric framework and the supporting library, but I stick into a OS IPC component there. We'll get to it in a moment. So also there are a couple things changed on the underlying technologies. Instead of using a non-SQL DB like the MongoDB, for simplicity, just using a simple dictionary to keep track of all the peers. ProtocolBuffer is still there. ZMQ is still there. DBus is the actual IPC components. It's sort of, well, I'm hesitant to use the word COM-like, but it's pretty close to COM, just personal opinion. It's still object-oriented underneath. Use the Unix domain socket underneath to talk to different processes, and there's a daemon in the middle. The development environment, I started with LXC. Well, I actually started with Docker. That didn't work really well because of the DBus service component. And then moved to LXC, and a couple of days ago I found out that's not good enough. It just shares the host system's kernel, so it's giving me some trouble running multiple instances. So for the testing, so that the scalability part is questionable right there. So the final format of the image probably will be LXC on top of VM. So at this point, it's pretty much too costly to migrate LXC to a different platform, but it will run just fine on a VM. And these two, I don't think I'll have time to get to. So one is the OSPF, which is dynamic routing. The other one's the gateway. That one probably not going to be there.
I like what you're doing to show us what the changes are and where you had the problems. That's good.
Yeah. So this is pretty much as a project layout. It's not exactly a package diagram because several components still needs to be decided yet. So the Google ProtocolBuffer, which is responsible of defining all the protocol that use between all the layers, is actually, this is the using relationship. I couldn't find the right arrow. So basically, all of the components, including the user app, will basically obey to a certain predefined protocols to transfer data back and forth. And the fabric service components is the one that's sitting in the middle, and it talks to each side of the server. So this is the local side, this is the system side, local side, and this is the actual wire side of the framework using right now the approach is a message queue, a bidirectional message queue. It might change to a blocking queue in case I employ threading to handling these tasks. So basically, the DBus is the major change into the system. By employing DBus, basically, it cleans up sort of these peer-to-peer IPC communication that goes on between different processes. So the idea of the fabric is that regardless what your client application is, as long as this piece of IoT device, it could be a server, it could be anything, as long as it's powered on, the framework should be running. So as I said before, the framework is not only not only used for maintaining connection in case of failure, but it also every node on the framework act as a member that can help to relay the traffic or balance the load of a particular given server. So this is the whole idea behind the DBus. So basically, when the service is running, multiple user application can attach to the bus and use the bus at the same way, and the two application does not have to know what each other is doing. So to them, they have exclusive control of the fabric framework. Everything else is handled by the fabric service. So let's just jump to the first probe really quick.
So because this is Internet of Things, there could be a scalability issue here. I mean, you can max out the bus.
Right, so the bus, yeah, right now the bus is actually quite expensive. I think every method code, remote procedure code is costing like 10 copy operations, 4 context switches or something like that. So a way to go around this, so basically, when a client application makes a call, that gets to put into the marshaler buffer, whatever, after the marshal message, gets to put into the Unix domain socket buffer. And then the DBus daemon have to copy it also to his own buffer and put it on the destination buffer. So that's one way, and going backwards, another operation like this. So another way to basically
It's a pipeline, so
yeah,
that's that's better than
right. A way to mitigate this issue is to move the entire DBus component into the kernel, which then is working in kernel space. Has a lot more leverage on that data transfer. But yeah, there is something called KTBus for this, which is actually working inside the kernel. But I thought, well, just get this one to work first, and then later on, because the way that the queue are designed is that I can easily swap out any of the component as long as I expose this queue, as long as the ProtocolBuffer protocols are defined, regardless what this is, it will work with the Fabric service itself. So initially the thought is just making straight API calls, but that doesn't cope with the idea that this Fabric service should be staying on all the time, even when this don't even exist. So that's the idea. This scalability part, when the message gets more, this is the other feature that I have in mind. Probably won't happen for this project. What I have in mind is when the request goes over the maximum limit that this particular node can handle, other node will help to offload the request. So let's say if my maximum, I'm one node, and my load limit is five clients, right? So if I'm getting 6 clients, I can offload, cache a copy of data to another node and redirect the rest of the client to the other node. And this entire process is transparent to the user app and the client. It's all handled by the Fabric.
But every process on one particular machine is using that same bus.
Well, there are only a handful of processes in this case, because this is local. Given that this is an IoT device, usually I might have a sensor sitting right here. I might have maybe a logger sitting right here. The sensor that provides the data, that is the data producer, and maybe a data consumer. So I don't expect there won't be like 10 million processors sitting right there. Given this IoT device is a Raspberry Pi, that the hardware itself is a limitation. But the idea is to scale on this side of the bus, right? So I can have a million of those devices. Sure. So anyway, that's the idea. So the probe, I found that DBus is actually pretty nice. So let's see. This is actually, I'm waiting for the X Windows session to forward over. So this is actually a DBus. I'm using the session bus. There are 2 buses in there. One is the session bus, which is tied to this particular SSH session. The other one is the actual system bus, where a lot of the hardware events are going on. So take a look at the code for a moment. That's good enough, large enough to see. Okay. So this class pretty much inherent is a DBus service object. So this whole class is a DBus service object. By basically defining the URL and the input and output signature, and basically exposing this particular function to the entire DBus interface. So by doing this function is what they call introspectable. So any service that's attached to the DBus is able to basically see this particular. Let me just show you. See this particular function and be able to call it. So the namespace I give it is net.movement.do.fabric.hello, or this is the actual declaration to claim a bus. So, if I look in the session bus, oh, there it is. All the interfaces are exposed right here. So let's say if I do a hello. So, the input and output type are basically visible by any process that's attached to the bus. So the underlying technology that make this happen is actually this introspect method. This is the base class method. So if I execute this, you can actually see it returns sort of like a XML. It returns a description on what this particular class does, and the client, let's say the client basically will use it to determine what methods are available to call and what's the input and output requirements. So this is just let's call one of them. So what I'm using right here is called DFeed. This is a graphic GUI debugger for writing applications for DBus, which I found is out to be really nice. So let's look at the logic right here. I'm just calling this very simple logic. It takes an input of an int. It gives out a double precision floating point. So in the function itself, it just print out, oh, I got whatever number I got, and then return 1 consistent. Just to demonstrate. And you can see the actual interaction between the client and the actual application. So this is what I print out. Now, one interesting thing is, if I somehow cause this to produce an exception, it's not going to crash the program. In fact, the exception is actually getting returned to the client program who's calling it. So this is still running, and if I give it the correct it's still responding. It's fine. Let's try one. Basically, that one just increments. Not that exciting. So that's the DBus part. Basically, I found this to be a very elegant inter-process communication for the client-side application. So basically, any client can attach the DBus and discover what methods is available. What methods is provided available by the Fabric service. So, and the major thing I have problem with this is the underlying library. DBus is a specification. They're like a Xalian library that implements this specification. And the very reason why I use Python instead of C, I started with C, is to compatibility with those libraries. So basically, I moved the entire DBus service to Python just because of this compatibility issue. And as Dr. Foster mentioned before, this is not good enough for moving a large amount of data. So probably using a side channel like a shared memory for that purpose. KTBus can support over gigabytes of data, but like when the data size scale up, it's still not scalable in a sense. So and also I'm experiencing an issue with LXC, which I'll get to in a bit. LXC have this shared kernel concept, which part of the DBus appears to be in the kernel. So if I run 2 instances of the container, they try to fight with the same name. When one registered, the other one just couldn't register, although they're supposedly in an isolated environment. So apparently I found it.
Well, I mean, the containers don't. That's the whole idea of the container,
The file
right?
systems are isolated, but the kernel is
The processes are isolated, but they're sharing all the core OS functionality.
Right. So the other reason why I think this might happen is every time I log into the server through an SSH session, that creates a separate session bus for that particular session. So I'm actually using jump host to log into the server, so I can actually do the SFTP and all that stuff. So I go through a bastion call first. So I'm not quite sure which session I'm getting. I might be getting the host session, or I might be getting the container session. So when I run this DFeed, the reason that I can see the system bus make me speculate that I might be this is actually the session that's attached to the host instead of the actual container. So I'm not quite sure what's going on back there, but just a speculation. A workaround is easy. I actually tried to do this on a Raspberry Pi, having two separate machines, and then this problem can be resolved. Now, ProtocolBuffer. So Google ProtocolBuffer is what they claim is a language-neutral protocol description tool for formatting and serializing messages into binaries onto the wire. So basically, how this works is we define a message, and the protocol compiler will compile this into whatever header file that is requested for that particular language platform. And then inside, in this case, it's Python. We just hold the corresponding.
It sounded a lot like COM.
That's what I'm getting.
The feeling is COM. Yeah.
Like, but this part is the marshaling part,
yeah.
which is ProtocolBuffer. But it's object oriented in a sense, but like I feel like this plus the DBus, that's like exactly COM. But I don't know. So let's see. So what I want to demonstrate right here is the same thing. The program, just leave it running. So basically right here, I'm basically marshaling a message together, put it in the queue, and the bottom side, which is the ZMQ side, will dequeue this message and unmarshal it. And as a so what this is doing is to get the service status of the ZMQ. So in that sense, a application can basically make a request to see, okay, what's the status of the bus? Am I ready to send data onto the wire? So nothing fancy. So this is the actual ZMQ bottom interface, and when this gets the request, it goes to a message handler, and then I'll marshal that data, figure out what it is, does what it's supposed to do, and put the message back on the other end of the queue. Right now, of course, it's offline, so if it gets status, the message basically is parsed and get back. Nothing really fancy, but this is just to demonstrate that the ProtocolBuffer itself is working across all three layers. So what I learned from ProtocolBuffer is it's still kind of buggy. I'm using the latest version, the Protocol version 3. There is a version 2, but I want to take advantage of this any type, which the type of the message can be determined at runtime rather than runtime. So it's extendable, and when I want to change something, it can really be applied to all the components in the bus. And adding message and wrapping it is actually quite nice. But when the layer, so I'll be going too fast. Do this really quick. These messages are wrapped in layers. So depending on what the type of message is, but these are the primitive types of the message, and this IPC message is actually getting wrapped inside of this fabric message. So each layer, each corresponding layer will basically decode the message and parse it into useful format. This is kind of nice when we want to send the data, go through multiple components, so that each component can basically identify the pieces needed for that particular component. But when I'm putting on more and more wraps, sometimes it gets really confusing which layer I'm working on. Yeah, and there's the parsing issue on the ARM platform. So when I try this on the Raspberry Pi, there seems to be some sort of bug that's going on. So
you mean a Google bug?
Yeah, Google bug. They actually have a bug tracker saying that there's a problem there. Wait for the next release. All right. Yeah. So this is the part that is giving me some trouble. So I decided to use the push and pull pattern for the ZMQ. Primarily, so ZMQ is an asynchronous socket. So primarily, I have this in mind so that an intermediate node can relay certain packets if needed. So if these two nodes, well, this is from the ZMQ website to illustrate the socket operation. But when one node cannot reach the other node, my mental model is that an intermediate node can basically help it to relay. So that's why I picked this ZMQ pattern. It was working before, but somehow so. When I
Is are you, is your model, this is a store and forward model? So he can't talk to this guy right now, so he stores messages up and then he'll forward them when he...
So basically, the fabric logic part is actually, right now, I kept it quite simple. So let's say when I want to try to talk to Christina, right? She's back there, I couldn't reach her. Basically, I'll try to propagate this message across the network. And there will be a time to live field. So that basically saying that this message can only be bounced so many times, otherwise I get the whole network flooded.
Okay.
So it will basically be a best effort. The heuristic is quite simple. I kept it simple for simplicity reason. So, this is the actual ZMQ trying to send the register request and actually send the message. But when I do the traffic sniffing, I couldn't see it after ITS folk did something magical. I don't think it's probably something I missed. I don't think this is going to be a big issue. Worst case scenario, if this doesn't work, I'll just throw the entire, again, with that queue implementation, I can throw the entire ZMQ out of the window and just use regular sockets. So that's
ZMQ's been around a long time, hasn't it? You would expect that.
Yeah, I did a little test actually. When I just try to shoot stuff onto localhost, I can get it, but when I do TCP dump, try to see what's going on, try to sniff that traffic, I couldn't see anything. So it was working before, so I'll have to figure out what's going on. So since this one don't work, there's a bonus one. I'll go fast at that. All right, we're good. So basically, this is the message queue and the lookup table that I use to dispatch after receiving a particular message. This is still very prototype. So the type of the message is the key inside this dictionary. And when the Google ProtocolBuffer actually get this message, Google will use a code called which off. So this is actually defined in the buffer as, basically that particular line will determine, one of command basically means only one of them, these can be valid at the same, at a given packet. So I cannot set both of these. So the protocol buffer actually enforces these. So when the protocol buffer get this message, basically it will determine which one it is, and will invoke and fire up the corresponding handler. And the handler are basically just function pointers and points to you use that message as a key to look up the corresponding function pointer to invoke that particular function.
Does that work like a union? So there's really only one underlying field, and you're tagging which one it is?
I'm not quite sure, but underneath, all I know is this Go object going underneath, but I don't know what's the underlying. I don't think it's union. I haven't looked into the detail yet, but I think there's some sort of check, like if one is set, and if you try to set the other one, it raises an error. So I think there's like a check logic.
Well, a variant is a tagged union, and it kind of sounds that, your description kind of sounds like that's what might be.
Okay.
But I don't know.
But you can set like a bunch of them, and with that one particular data field, and you can have another data field which is also one-off and have a bunch of. Well, the part that doesn't make sense to me is once you have this approach, we serialize into binary. Sometimes things might not work out. We have two of them because the length of the previous one you're not quite sure. Like because the request could be a string, it could be a int32, it could be an unsigned int, but the size might be different. I think my guess is they're probably using some sort of check logic, like make sure that only one is set in compile time, or in this case, interpretation time, then they're misinterpreting it, doing that check in. And let me demonstrate. So what I'm going to demonstrate is basically this handler working. So the whole communication all the way up from the client application down to the ZMQ is working. So what I'm going to do is basically invoke a query method. So right now ZMQ is of course connected, and when I call this get status method, is still offline because I haven't updated it. And when I invoke the update status method, it's happening live right here. This is actually parsing the message, putting it into the queue. Underneath ZMQ dequeues it, figure out as a get status command, and it will invoke it, parse the corresponding response command, put it back to the queue in the other direction, and that queue gets sent to the DBus. DBus sent to the DBus interface, which is another queue. So and now if we query, you can actually see the message content right here. This is one of the any field that I use, so I can put anything into it as long as it's parsed into a Marshaling into the binary format. If I query this, that was a previous result return. Now if I query this variable is set inside the DBus class, so this value also gets updated. All right. So what I learned from this, come on. So using segmented queue is actually, I think is a nice approach. There's some performance sacrifices right there because we're dequeuing something and queuing into another queue. But this allows easy addition. If I want to stick another component in the middle, I simply break that queue and attach something to it, reestablish the queue. So basically, the data paths can be easily changed depending on how these queues are routed. Now, and the lookup table basically makes adding a particular function into a particular function or a bus message into the entire system very easily. Because all I need to do is add it to the ProtocolBuffer, make sure everyone knows that function is there, and simply adding the handler function for that key. Now, the summary is that this probe is intended to demonstrate the mechanism used to facilitate all the communication within the buffer itself is working. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get the ZMQ to work today, and there is a huge setback caused by the compatibility with the testbed. I thought LXC is actually the perfect solution. Apparently, I'm wrong. So a workaround is actually quite simple. Just put it onto the VM. You have isolated environment instead of into one host machine.
Those are valuable lessons, and I don't have any issue with somebody sitting up in a presentation saying, you're trying interesting things that were new to you, new to us, and some of them work and some of them work out and some of them don't.
I think this is the reason why I picked this project, because everything, including the ProtocolBuffer or ZMQ, although it has been there for a while, is new to me. DBus I just recently added it. I thought it was very interesting. I learned a lot. I learned a lot of the stuff the hard way too. So, final remark. So the critical component, all the critical components other than ZMQ are functional. So once I connect the ZMQ, pretty much I will have a working fabric. So basically, to reduce the complexity, I'll use a simple fabric logic heuristic for routing. Instead of trying to dynamically figure out which ones are shorted through, I'll just make it work through the list. So that and is basically failure recovery or self-heal. I was going to submit a Docker container. That probably will not happen because of the DBus changes. And that pretty much does it.
And the problem with the containers were that you were getting conflicts in the shared kernel part.
I think that's what happened, but I could be wrong. It might be the session bus that's conflicting. Like, this fabric really should be attached to the system bus instead. But my initial thought is, okay, I'm running as a container, I have a root anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So I pick session bus because it's a lot less traffic on it, so it's easier to see what's going on. The system bus have a lot of whether the USB device is attached, whether you have like a graphic card on the PCIe bus, you have all that information. You won't deal with it. So I'll probably figure this out in the next 5 hours. So,
Okay.
yeah. Any questions?
Good. So, yeah, we got time. Let's do you. We'll go a little over.
Looks like I only have 20 minutes.
We go until 4:50, don't we? So you have 20 minutes. If you think it'll take a lot longer, if you want to defer until Tuesday, we can. Yeah, okay. We can defer until Tuesday. So what I'll do then, before you guys leave, let me hand out the rest of the grading that I haven't for anybody who is here. So Fred, I have your presentation from yesterday. Yadang Wang, not here. Lakshmi Sandra is not here. Kernel Paliwal, I think he's interviewing. John Jingtian is not here. Ruchi Kai is not here. Ming Chu here. Arpit Shaw, I saw him this morning, so Kernel Paliwal, Ruchi Kai, and Ting. Some of these are from the two different presentations. Okay, I am still grading your project ones. In fact, Wednesday was supposed to be a big progress day, but it didn't turn out to be because I was working on some socket code. So, but I'll have them back for you on Tuesday. On Tuesday, then we'll do 3 presentations, and I'm sure that one will go long. You'll be first on Tuesday, and you'll be second, and the other guy will be third. Wouldn't surprise me.
On Thursday.
But we're not. Tuesday is the last day of classes. We're not going to do anything on Thursday. I'm going to be grading. The presentations are May, the final presentations are May, I think it's 5th and 6th, it's a Saturday and Sunday before graduation. And there's time slots, but I would like everyone who's presenting on Saturday to come right at 9 and sit through the whole day, so everybody has an audience, and the same for Sunday. I know there'll be a few people who will elect to come just before their presentation, and I will record that fact. I account for that on my grade sheet, so just a little forewarning.
Do we have to do the same thing for presentation?
So, good question. So what do I do? My model of the final presentation is a combination. It's like you're combining the technology presentation with one longer probe, which is your presentation. But what you're really doing is saying, here is my project, here's what it's supposed to do, and here's a demonstration of it working the way I had planned it to work, or working as well as I could get it to work from my plan. And then beefier conclusions. One of my gripes about the probing is that not everybody has really done a good job summarizing what they learned. You know, what conclusions can I draw from this? Here I ran this code. What conclusions can I draw from? I thought Gianna did a pretty good job. He had summaries. I would have preferred to see a summary with each probe rather than at the end, but that was my model, you know. So, wait, Jenny.
So is it going to be like basically if you're going to show our final project, kind of like the probing where we show our final project and then show like code from parts of it?
Yeah, you know, I don't expect anybody to try to walk through every line. Please don't. Yeah. Most of the presentations we've walked through a little more code than we should have. Today, I think both presenters walked through a little more code. You know, it was good, but a little more code. You know, especially with Eric's is harder. The Go, you know, you got the idea. The idea is really clear, and so a snapshot of the code here, a snapshot of the code here, trying to do two things. One is here's a typical functionality. Here's how I do this, but also here's the neatness of Go. Look at what Go did for us. Eric's was a little harder to do that way because he's talking about things that are less familiar to both us and him. Okay, so, but my model is that we'll highlight the code, we'll absolutely show working code, absolutely show final results, and try to, you know, I think it'd be really good to have a flow, kind of some sort of flow diagram so we can follow what's happening. You know, so here's that flow diagram, and then here's a code at this segment, and here's a little piece of code at this segment, and here's the results flowing out here. Something you know, metaphorically. Okay. Any other questions about that? All righty, we're done. Did you get an email from me about the Dropbox? Yeah. Okay. So what you were doing won't work because you can't have references at that, you know, that you can't pass that socket by reference in, because in that accept loop, the next time around the loop is going to get stepped over. And if the guy in the client handler has a reference to that guy, he just got stepped over.
Yeah, I ended up just adding and then using serial.
Almost worked,
It won't
Because
work.
I looked online.
It could work, but it can't work reliably.
yeah, it's stuck somewhere, the socket close and there within the test. There's a close and then it says which says stop.
Yeah.
It was stuck there.
It's just not going to run
Which
reliably.
I don't get it, but I'm worried about.
The issue is that when you pass a reference, you're not passing that object. That object is sitting out here in the while loop, and it keeps getting written over. Every time around the while loop, it's going to get written over. You're not passing it in the socket. You're passing in a reference back to that socket in the while loop, and every time around the while loop, you get a new socket, bam, on top of the old one, bam, on top of the old one, bam, on top of the old one.
Isn't that supposed to be a different socket? Because
Yes, but you're still using the first, you know, so you make a connection, you pass a reference. So here this guy's sitting out here, this object is still out of the loop, and you pass him a reference into it, and now the next connection is going to come over, bam, crunch his socket. So, but the fix that I showed by using, in that chain of calls, I used a reference myself in one. It did no harm because I'm passing by value, but in that sandwich, it was passed by reference. That's what GCC didn't like. You change that to get rid of that reference, pass it by value, and it works. Bam, it starts working right away.
but I was wondering why. So when we're moving it, we're essentially passing a power value, which is, I guess, I'm more interested.
When you're moving it, it's the model is it's a temporary, and for us it really is, even though it isn't a temporary inside that loop. That's why you have to use the standard move. You're telling the compiler, treat this like a temporary, because it's going to get crunched in a minute anyway. The next connection is going to crunch it. So what you're going to do is you're going to create a new object inside there that's using this guy's resources, and we're going to disconnect him from those resources.
The point where I'm not sure what's going on there is that what's the difference between because it's the thread is calling the callable object, so there has to be some form of implicit conversion.
The thread passes everything by value, unless you say standard reference and you don't want to. It's passing everything by value. And so there, I am just copying. So what's going to happen with that callable object is either, well, it's just going to copy it in. And for those callable objects, that's fine. But the socket, I don't want to, in fact, I've made my socket uncopyable. So but the standard move does exactly what I want. It puts a new object inside that thread that has the resources that were returned by the accept function. It's that socket connection.
But how it is running in Windows, like perfectly, it was running fine.
That was, that code would run fine in GCC if GCC didn't give the error message. It would run fine. It's just that GCC is saying this isn't a good idea. Okay? Because I really am trying to move stuff down that chain, and when it saw that reference, I'm not moving that reference. So GCC complained about you're trying to move, you're trying to pass by reference a movable object. Not a good idea. And like I told you, I changed that. I got rid of that one reference in the middle in both windows, and it works fine both places. So that's a case where it works, but there are some situations where it might not work. It works for this code, and it's not just a timing. I mean, it's fine. There's no funny business. But you give it a different scenario, different things feeding it, and it might not work. When you pass when you're trying to, you don't want to pass a movable object in by reference. It always wants to go in by value so that it will move. But anyway, that's what that error was all about. So I think GCC is being a little more conservative about its error message. That's only the only real difference between them. GCC is really conservative about it.
For the final presentations, my team hasn't come out with our schedule for next week with everyone's finals. I'm assuming it'll be Saturday, 9 to noon-ish. My presentation says 3:15. I should make it fine. I just wanted to let you know that.
Okay, good.
That I'm aware of it, and I'll let you know what time I actually.
Yeah. So, because of your schedule, you got more than most of the, you got a more rigorous schedule. So I don't have an issue. You show up, we'll give you a slot. We'll figure out a way to give you in real time. That'll work.
Okay, perfect.
We're here all day, and so if we, somebody gets bumped back, it's not good.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I leave tomorrow.
See ya.
Second to last regatta, and then we have a race this weekend, and then we race twice at ACCs. And if we don't make NCAA's, which we hopefully will, we're done.
Oh, you're contenders for NCAA's?
Well, I went the last 2 years.
Oh,
The
did
last
you?
2 years, yeah.
Fantastic.
But right now we're not ranked where we want to be. We're hoping this weekend we can do better, and then we'll make it NCAA. Yeah, it's probably going to end really quickly.
We're gonna meet for the.
Yeah, going to meet with Vibu right now to talk to him about this weekend because I'm going to be gone tomorrow. And then tomorrow he's planning on being there from 9 to 2. I expect everyone to be there for at least for hours, within that, or if they can't, then a little bit later. I'll be on a bus, so I'll be I can message people and stuff.
We're gonna meet today.
I'm going right now. My boyfriend's brother's in town, so I'm having dinner with them. So So I have to go meet, but I'm going to meet him right now. I'm not sure if the rest of the team is meeting. I know people have been working individually.
Well, I've been through the Angular and I find out that we put everything into a performance perspective. That would be rather easy to solve the current M1. It's just you have to be consistent. Someone is working on a page that is display a prohibition or display a data point, and anyone else don't need to do it. So when they go through the Angular process, it will be referenced by a single component.
Okay. And that component itself will change according to who they are as men.
So,
So is that in
that's hard to do in a typical
yeah.
but it's easier in Angular. One trying to say is that there is a very specific task for a page. I need to assign
Okay.
for a single person, either by a single responsibility or
Like the dashboard, where the dashboard.
for instance, dashboard needs to edit some data point, also need to display some which can be do in a single because some other, for instance, do a search and the result is came up. Result is might also use the like identity info, which can be reused. Just
Okay.
So
But the HTML itself is going to need to be there.
yeah, but what I'm trying to say is
it doesn't be separate for everyone.
no, what I'm trying to say is you want to avoid people doing things that eventually going to be shredded out and redone. Because if someone is doing a entity page, then the other people don't need to redo it.
Yeah, for
So
that
we
component.
compartmentalize it.
That's what was in the Dropbox folder, plus some screenshots.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
See you guys.
So you're talking about like if somebody's working on dashboard, only one person should be working on dashboard?
Not necessarily, but if there is component that can be reused by multiple pages or multiple components, because it can component inside components, then you don't want.
It shouldn't be done multiple times to be able to
You
have
don't-
to take the code out.
You don't want someone doing this and another one doing this, and we have 2 branches or 4 branches.
Okay, so I'm hoping that tomorrow morning everyone shows up. I tried to make that clear. I'll post tonight again. That everyone needs to show up. And you can talk, like, you can discuss that with everyone.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go meet with Bibu and I'll clear some things up regarding like what I'm.
Because I saw,
doing.
I met Ashita before, and I talked to her about the how to deal with because definitely the info page, and also POM, which is by
Oh yeah.
so either have to, if with the current, we either have to do it or Sandra have to do it. But with this, we won't.
So it's basically you have multiple different files and then one file and like all the right things.
So it will be, it's a specific syntax, but it looks like you're referencing a special component. So you have a tag of A and header tag. Angular will have a tag called component info with a specific syntax that says where this data came from. And that's it. That's what you see in the Angular will handle the rest. So that component has a different definition of HTML. And the HTML can be divided. Like
I think I kind of understand it, but it'll be more clear if
I think I have it, but you're probably gonna.
I'm gonna go to the library.
All right.
If you want to go to the
All
library.
right, so I'm gonna go.
Okay. Yeah, this weekend is not the weekend to be gone. It's making it very difficult for everything. To travel.